Lucinda Sage-Midgorden. How are you today?
I'm I'm good.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm glad. Really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with the creative community. You got quite a range of a background that I think we'll be able to dive into quite a few things that are going to be highly beneficial for creatives across the board.
I hope so.
Yeah. Before we go ahead and start off, let me give a brief introduction here for you so the audience has a feel for who you are and some of the things that you've done. You have an education and theater background with BA degrees in religious studies, theater, and speech, and you hold master's degrees in theater arts and secondary education. Career in acting, stage management, instruction, and directing. And you use this foundation to enrich your work in writing and storytelling. You're also an author, independently published multiple books, including children's and non or fiction works. And you pursue ongoing writing projects demonstrating deep commitment to the craft of story and artistic self expression. You initiated a YouTube channel, Classic Cinema with the Sage Sisters, engaging audiences through analysis of classic films to reveal narrative lessons and inspire creative thinking across mediums. You're a podcaster where you developed and host the podcast Story Power, where you interview creatives and explore how storytelling shapes lives and art. You're also a blogger, founded the blog and platform Sage Woman Chronicles, which centers on the intersections of arts, spirituality, and life, and has produced consistent content around creative recovery and inspiration. That's quite a bit.
I'm old.
Well, I would venture to say you're probably not as old as you might feel. I think sometimes we look at age and don't realize potentially how much extra time we still have of life if we're looking at it in quarterly scenarios.
Yes, and I suppose that's true. My family died in their 80s and 90s. My dad was the only one who died young, fairly
Yeah.
young. He was 74,
Oh, wow. Okay.
but he had heart disease. So, yeah.
Gotcha.
But all of his siblings died in their 90s. So,
Oh, so you got plenty of time.
and my mom was 91 when she died. So, yeah.
Nice. My mom's mom, my grandmother, she died at 95. So
Oh,
she had quite a
yeah.
long life.
Yeah.
So as we discussed prior to hitting the record button, I don't have a whole lot of structure other than my initial first question, and that is, where were you born and what was life like as a kid for Lucinda?
Oh, oh, yes. I forgot that you asked that. I was born in Des Moines, Iowa, only because my dad was in the Air Force, which he hated. My dad
Oh,
did not like authority at all. But he had dyslexia, and even though he taught himself how to read, he dropped school because they said he was lazy and he was stupid. And I mean, you can't be stupid if you have dyslexia and you teach yourself how to read. But
right.
so he needed a trade, and he went to the Air Force so he could learn how to be a machinist and a mechanic. So he worked on the airplanes during the Korean War. He
Okay.
was here in the States the whole time. And my dad's oldest brother, who was a pilot in World War II, was a doctor. And so actually, my dad and mom lived in Belleville, Illinois, but my mom went up to Des Moines where my Uncle Joe was practicing, and he's the one who delivered me, my Uncle Joe. Um, and my grandparents lived in Des Moines too at the same time. So when my brother was born and after my dad got out of the Air Force, we moved back to Portland, Oregon, where mom and dad had met and married.
Okay.
And we lived there from I was 3, I think, when we moved there. And we lived there until I was 10. When the older of my two younger sisters was born, there was 8 years between my brother and the older of the two younger sisters. And there's 13 years between me and the sister that I do the classic cinema with the Sage sisters
Okay.
channel with. Her name is Celeste. And so we lived there until I was 10. And then my dad was working at Freightliner. I don't know if you know that
Okay.
truck company. He was building trucks. That's what he was doing in Portland. And then for some reason, and I don't know why, we moved to the Washington side of the Columbia River across from the Dalles, Oregon. And we lived in this little like trailer. It had 2 or 3 bedrooms, but it was really, a single wide
Yeah.
trailer on some property. And I think we went there because of church reasons. My dad was going to be a pastor at the um, local little group of church members. I grew up in the church it's actually the Supreme Court said it was the original church that Joseph Smith created, but
Okay.
its headquarters is in Independence, Missouri. But I don't belong to that church anymore, and none of us go to the church anymore. But he was a lay minister, so he had to work, and he was a minister. And my mom really helped him with that because she could type 100 words on a manual typewriter. And so, she would type up his sermons, and she would help him with when they had to go visit somebody at their home, that kind of stuff. So, since I was the oldest, I got to take care of the kids while they were gone. But so then we lived there until I finished 7th grade. So it's 5th grade to 7th grade. We lived there. And then we moved to Goldendale, Washington, which is a little farther east and away from the river a little bit. And we lived there until for 1 year. I was in 8th grade that year. And that's when my sister Celeste was born. She was born in Goldendale. And then we moved to Wilbur, Washington, which is even farther east.
Okay.
And it's in the wheat country, wheat farming. And at that time, it happened to be the largest wheat producing county in the whole United States.
Oh, wow.
So when I moved there, uh, that was the only place I felt like I was bullied of all the places that I lived. We were
Oh,
there for 2 years. And then, well, I mean, they had all grown up together, and here comes this new person. And, we moved. I went to 2 different high schools. So we moved at the beginning of my junior year to south of Spokane, Washington.
okay.
So we moved all the way from practically the ocean to right before the Rocky Mountains begin. And so that was a much nicer school. I liked that school better. I was accepted better at that school.
Gotcha.
But fortunately for me in Wilbur, the principal of that school was my 7th grade principal way back in Lisle. And so he got wind of all the bullying, and something happened. I was really stupid. There were some Native American girls who probably boys too, who went to our school. And I said something stupid in the locker room. I was just trying to figure out something about them, and they overheard me. And so they ambushed me one day in class, at math class. Everybody must have known because nobody was in class except for me and them.
Yeah.
So when we got dragged to the principal's office, it was not very good for them because he knew me already.
Uh,
Um, and everybody got wind of it. Oh, the principal knows her. We can't bully her anymore. So that's when the bullying stopped, was because oh yeah, he knows who she is. Okay. He's going to be
interesting.
watching her.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, some really stupid things happened, but they're just kids. So after that, I graduated in 1971, and I went off on a year-long church thing. It was sort of like the Peace Corps, is modeled after the Peace Corps. And I was For a year, I was a teacher's aide at Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary School in Portland, Oregon, with about 5 or 6 other people. We were all
Okay.
a team.
Gotcha.
And
So let's back
it,
up just a little bit to elementary school because the amount of times that you've gone to a different school every
mm,
couple of years, I imagine that was a bit disruptive in terms of how you were navigating friendships, getting along, different things like that. Were you one of those students who were shy sitting in the back of the class, or were you more interested in what was going on and wanted to sit up towards the front?
I think I sat in the middle. I
Okay.
am an introvert, but one thing I learned when we moved to Dallasport, it's not called Dallasport anymore, but yeah, when I went to fifth grade at that school, fifth and sixth there, and then seventh grade, I went to Lyle
Yeah.
on the bus. I I learned to do this in each of the school. I kind of perfected it as we moved. I would sit back and look at and see how things worked in that school,
Okay.
and then how can I fit in there?
Got you. Yeah.
And yeah, which I guess I was thrown a little bit when I went to Wilbur and nothing I did mattered at first. I mean, I was trying to do that. I was trying to sit back and say, okay, how do things work at this high school? Um, and so that was a really valuable skill, but it was also difficult for
Got
me
you.
to move because I would make friends at the school and then we'd move.
Right.
So, I don't have not any school friends from elementary or middle school or high school that I keep
Wow.
in contact with. I have none, none.
Okay.
Because once, I think it was about 2 years or three. It's about 2 or 3 years after I graduated from high school. No, I guess it was 2 years after I got home from the service corps that and we moved again.
Okay.
So, and dad said, don't stay here because he didn't like the church. The church people were very conservative. My dad was not
Okay.
conservative. And we were not treated very well. My dad would get hate mail
Oh,
from,
wow.
from the church members. I'm the one who remembers that because I'm the oldest.
Yeah.
And things happen like usually they would have like a celebration for all the seniors who were graduating. Well, it happened that I was the only senior the year that I was graduating, and they decided, oh, we're not going to have a celebration for Lucinda because she's the only one. My mom was livid. So dad didn't want me to stay there because of what was going on with the church people. And
Yeah.
he finally got the job. Well, I won't say it was the job of his dreams, but it was the job that was of his dreams in terms of how much it paid. He got the job at the Bremerton shipyards
Okay.
as a machinist. And then later he went to Keyport. This was when I was at college. He got transferred to Keyport and worked at the Trident submarine base.
Mm.
And he was highly creative because while he was there, he created a tool that they needed to help build the submarines.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bremerton, I was only there for like 9 months. And before mom and dad were going to move to Bremerton, I had signed up for college in Spokane.
Okay.
And so I withdrew, and then mom and dad put enough money together for my first year at Graceland, which is in southern Iowa, and it's a church-sponsored school. And it's a private school, so it was pretty expensive. But they paid for my first year there. My brother was already there because he had worked and gotten money to get put himself through school. And he also was it his first or second year there, I think he got married. And she was a teacher. So, yeah. So I got there in 75. I was 22, a little bit older than all the other students.
Yeah.
Although I had, because of my dad, my theology was different than everybody else's. And I thought differently than everybody else because of all the movie night, which I'll go into later. But, the movie nights that my mom and dad instituted to help us learn about what it means to be a human being and, what do you do with your emotions and all that kind of thing.
Right.
And man, I'm telling you, some of these 18-year-olds were spouting stuff that I thought 50-year-olds would talk about. It's very weird to me. And my first semester, I signed up to be a music major because I had a fairly nice singing voice, but I couldn't read music very well. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I said, oh, I'll just declare that as my major and then I'll see. But that first semester, I took Introduction to Religion and I was hooked
Mm.
because it was all about stories.
Yeah.
Stories from the Bible, stories from how religions how did Islam get started? How did, what about these Hindu gods,
Right. Right.
that kind of thing, you
Yeah.
know? And so the next semester I switched majors, which I got bullied in college more than I did in high school, I just realized. Because I was a woman, it was 1970s, women in hardly any religions were ministers. And so there were this group of about 3 or 4 young men that would attack, I call it attacking. They would accost me at lunch and dinner and thump their Bible and quote to me from the Bible that I needed to change my major. And in my head, I'm thinking, if you knew how the Bible was put together and where the books came from and stuff, you'd be shocked.
Yeah.
And if I could have, I would have said F you, but I was a very nice girl and I didn't swear back then. And so, I just let him. In fact, I blocked it, most of it out. I have no idea how long it went on. Finally, they got the idea I wasn't going to change my major and they left me alone. But my second year at college was really difficult because, right, sometimes all of your belief system, you got to take it out and look at it.
Mhm.
Well, I was doing that when I was taking my religion classes. And not only that, more than one person told me this. This young man I think he was from Ethiopia. He and I were in a class together and we were leaving class and he goes, are you always going to belong to the church? And I said, yeah. And he goes, why? I said, well, all my family belongs to the church. That's probably why. And I said, why are you asking me that? And he goes, you do not think like anybody else in that class. And I'm like, really? What do you mean by that? But it's not the first time. I mean, that was the first time, but other people have said that to me. I don't think like anybody else.
Right.
Um, Even in theater, when I was taking playwriting classes, we were supposed to keep little journals. And the teacher handed me my journal back at the end of the semester and said, nobody else's journal is like your journal.
Nice.
And I was like, really? Because I was writing what I thought and felt about things that were going on around me.
Right.
Nobody else did that. So it's not the first time that people have told me, you don't think like anybody else. And at first I thought, oh, that's kind of a bad thing. And then as I got older, I went, oh, no, that's not a bad thing.
Do you attribute a lot of that due to having to navigate going from school to school potentially and figuring out early on that you needed to be observant to begin with to figure out what was happening so you could try to fit in? And I think from my perspective, that would cause you to start thinking for real differently than most people
Yeah.
because you're trying to navigate the whole scenario.
Yeah. Because I had to do it every couple of years.
Yeah, right.
Well, that is one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is the whole movie night thing, because when we would watch the movies, we had commercials. And so during the commercial, my dad would say, okay, now what did you think about what just happened?
Okay.
And what do you think is going to happen next? And then he would ask questions about which one was your favorite character? Well, why was that your favorite character? So I mean, I don't know about my brother. He probably did because he thinks differently too.
Okay.
uh, but he's not a creative. He's more an analytical kind of a person.
Gotcha.
Uh,
Okay.
but yeah, so then I don't think I realized this to start with, but when I was observing, I was going back to because that was sometimes we'd say, Dad, why did that character do that?
Hmm.
And Dad would say, maybe this happened to them in their childhood, or this happened to them earlier in the day before the movie started, or last week, and he would come up with all these scenarios about what could have happened to that person that made them act the way they did or make the choices that they made. So as I'm observing, I think I actually started to do that was
Okay.
these people treating me like this. What? This is one thing that happened. It was biology class. The teacher had to leave the room for a little bit, and I was wearing a mini skirt that day, and I was the new girl. And these guys came, surrounded me, picked me up, and put me in one of those really tall, skinny trash cans that they have at the
Mm.
good schooling. Stuck me in there, and then they pulled the trash can out into the middle of the hall and stood around and watched, thinking I was going to try and get out of the trash can. I'm just like, okay, we'll just stand here until somebody comes. Eventually, teacher came along and went. The teacher came back and what are you guys doing? So that was only one thing that happened. So
That's that's a very interesting response to a bullying situation where you literally, i- in obstinate of what they were doing to you, you were like, all right, we'll just stand here until somebody comes along and sees what's happening and realizes what you're doing to me. That
yeah,
that's a very different, in and of itself, different way of thinking in regards to being picked on and trying to be made fun of or put in a situation where you would be totally embarrassed. So to
yeah,
take that stance of it, the way I'm seeing it is that you're not going to cause me to feel self-conscious or feel less than because you've pulled me out into the hallway in this garbage can. I'm just gonna stand here and wait you out.
yeah. Well, I probably at first was like, what, fight, trying to fight. And then I realized there's no point. There's no point. And I was kind of ticked off at the guys.
Sure.
Uh, so I wasn't gonna cry. I wasn't gonna do, you know, I mean,
Right.
there are situations where I really do have deep emotional, like this is
Promise.
way, way long after that. But Barry and I took a trip circumnavigating the globe in 1996,
Okay.
and there were pieces of artwork, like the statue of Joan of Arc in Notre Dame. I just started bawling the minute I saw it. And I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop crying. Barry's like, here, let's go over to this little. They had an area where you could sit and pray. And
Yeah.
they had a statue of Mary, the mother of Jesus, holding Jesus. And I just sat there and I don't know how long it was before I got control of myself. So, but that kind of situation, I mean,
Right.
it makes me ticked off.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you deciphered at any point in time why they might have anybody in the course of bouncing from school to school, anybody might have been picking on you for any specific reason, or was it just the meanness within them?
I don't, I never really thought about it until I had listened to one of your episodes and then I thought, oh, I should probably think about who my child, because I haven't thought about my childhood in a long time.
Sure.
And what I'm thinking is that was a very insular community.
Okay.
Everybody grew up together and we were the new kids. We were the
Right.
now
All the
my brother, yeah. every time, but I mean in Wilbur, in that particular community.
Okay.
Yeah. And now my brother is one of those people who jokes around a lot, and he can make friends, like that.
Yeah. Second child syndrome.
Yeah, and I'm one of those people who sits back and looks. I'm paying attention to and so I was the new kid. Nobody knew, they all knew each other. I think that was it.
Okay.
I don't understand. I won't say I don't understand it, because I do, but i- it's not part of me to want to bully somebody else.
Right.
Now, as a teacher, I've had to deal with bullies, and some of it was pretty nasty, and I had to threaten to. They were football players, so they thought they were the coolest guys.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
they were picking on a kid who was deaf in my English class. And I tried talking to their parents. I tried talking to the football coach. I tried talking to their other teachers. Nobody was doing anything. So I went to the principal and I said, "These guys are bullying this kid. I want to kick him out of my English class." It was a junior English class, which meant they would get kicked off the football team, and they had just made like state something
Right.
for,
Right.
and they would have to do 2 years of English in 1 year. So I just took them out in the hall, and I told individually and told them that. I said, "I'm going to kick you out of this room, out of this class, if you don't stop picking on this kid. And you'll have to take English, junior English again next year." Well, that shut him up.
Yeah. Definitely.
But I don't know how they treated the kid outside my class, but they never did it inside my class again.
So, with getting this realization from this fellow student in college about the way that you're thinking,
Mhm.
and also realizing, wait, I'm hearing this again in other situations. How is that with moving you forward through the rest of your theology courses?
I was the only woman in the program. I forgot to say that.
Okay.
Um, so I love taking all the classes. Some of, first level classes, there were other women in the classes, but I was the only other declared major. And so by the time I got to sophomore and then junior and senior year, it was me and all the guys.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I had to learn how to do was think and talk like a guy.
Okay.
That was one thing. Now, they were not disrespectful to me. It was my classmates were not disrespectful to me. It wasn't them, it was other people who thought that they knew what God wanted, I
Right.
guess.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, so another thing I had to do, well, I didn't not all the classes were theology, but when I was taking ethics, theology classes, I had one or two of those. Man, I would have to read those 50 pages or however 100 pages more than once between classes so that I could understand what they were talking about. Because, it's all intellectual stuff. And it's not that I'm stupid intellectually, but I'm more of a feeling person,
Okay.
emotional person.
Yeah.
So, how did these concepts translate to, the emotional connection to God?
Yeah. I'm with you.
So, I don't remember really having any difficulty in the classes. I mean, I passed all the classes. I might have even got A's in all the classes. I can't remember. But I did have a really great mentor who passed away recently, unfortunately. And he is the one who said, because my second year in college there was a whole bunch going on. I was getting harassed and some other stuff was going on. And he said, at the end of the semester, he said, "Go buy a notebook and start writing," which was like the best thing anybody could have ever said. And then in the summer, I had gone home to Bremerton And I was taking a couple of classes at Olympic Community College, and one of them happened to be interpersonal relations,
Okay.
taught by one of the theater instructors there. Now, I don't know what made him say this to me because it's an interpersonal communications class. But at one point, he said to me, "Have you ever thought of getting involved in theater?" And I went, "Well, I tried out for some plays in high school, but I didn't get a part. Uh, well, you might want to try that when you go back to college in the fall." So I did. I tried out for a play, didn't get a part, but I did get to run it was a musical because it was the homecoming play.
Okay.
I got to run the spotlight, and I was accepted by that group of people, the theater
Yeah.
people. So I tried out for the next play, which was Shakespeare. What was I thinking? The first play I ever got a part in was Shakespeare. And that's how I met my husband. He's 6 years younger than I am, so he was a freshman.
Mm,
And, and I'm a junior. I was a junior, an old junior, and I loved it. So I got involved with the theater troupe, but I also started taking classes. Like I took the crossover class, Shakespeare. You could get English credit or theater credit, for it, or
okay.
maybe you could get both. And I took some other classes, some other theater classes while I was finishing my religious studies.
Yeah.
So when I'm waiting for him to graduate with his art degree, I finished the theater degree.
Wow. That's interesting. I understand the aspect of college at a private Christian-based college. I went to Pensacola Christian in Florida to study graphic design. And the reason that I ended up going there for graphic design, one was my parents wanted me to go there because a lot of the kids that I had went to school with, high school, junior high, ended up going there. But the school itself had a publishing company.
Oh,
So a lot of the art students ended up working in the publishing company, illustrating books and stuff like that. So my thought was, okay, at the very least, I potentially can, get a job doing something like that after. I wasn't able to finish. It was way too hard for me in terms of I had to work the whole time as well to pay for my education, then take the classes. I was essentially failing everything in some art classes. And wasn't going to be able to pay again to take all of that stuff over
right.
just to get a degree. So I ended up dropping out eventually. But I understand the dynamics of being in those environments where you've got a good portion of the student body that's studying the theology and, you know, going to school to become ministers or missionaries or different things like that. And when you don't think like that because you have a different internal sense of what God and that relationship is between
Mhm.
us as humans, um, it doesn't always allow for a comfort zone to build up for you in that
Yeah,
environment. So I
yeah,
get it. Definitely get it.
yeah.
Once you realize that, oh, wow, this theater group is a lot more accepting of me and what might seem to be more like a community environment.
Mhm.
How did that make you feel in terms of realizing, I think I'm going to transition into this?
Actually, when I was going through those classes and when I was working with that group,
Yeah.
it was like what you said. And I do have to say that Graceland's a liberal arts college, so it has a lot of different degrees. It's not just the
Okay.
minister. It's not
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
but yeah, they were great. They accepted me and I got to do lots of different things. I also had a work study thing. So at one point I worked with Howard as his assistant, and then later I worked with Celia in the theater later when I graduated with my religious studies and I was just doing theater, I worked with Celia, helping her with sewing costumes and whatever she needed. But I was also sometimes in the plays.
Okay.
Um, and or for one time I was her assistant, like her see state wasn't really called stage manager, but it was sort of like a stage manager role. Excuse me.
Okay.
I have to move. And then I just did various jobs. And we all built the sets and so those two things though, I forgot to say, the journaling and the being in theater are kind of what helped me go, oh, because for like several months, I was, why is this happening to me? I was complaining and whining
Yeah. Yeah.
in my journal. And finally, one day I wrote, what am I supposed to be learning from this?
Mm,
Well, I got answers to that because the why is this happening to me? That's not a useful question, really.
right.
But what I'm supposed to be learning from this is I was supposed to be learning how to love myself. That was the first thing that came to me.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, oh, okay. So, but the theater people kind of, how sometimes you need someone to be on your side so that you can see
Oh, for sure.
yourself in a new way. That's
Yeah.
what was going on in the theater was those people actually saw me,
Yeah.
instead of, "This is who you should be. This is what you should be doing." Some of the other people that I was encountering in college were telling me that. You wouldn't be telling me that if you knew who I was. So that was the thing that those 2 things together really helped me kind of go in a kind of a new trajectory. And truly, it was when I was a junior that Barry came, so I wasn't in Shakespeare that year. Well, anyway, whenever it was. And meeting him and we had this like group of people that we associated with. We'd go to the pizza shack together, or we'd go to the theater to the play to a movie together. Or we'd have a game night together. Because
Okay.
at one point I realized I was 25 by then and oh, I'm probably never going to get married. I was only 20. But yeah, and then Barry was part of that group. And then one day we realized, oh, mm, we there's something there between us. And so at first, I thought he was a really great guy, but he's too young. He's too young. We were also in choir together.
Okay.
That right behind me in choir.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so we did plays together, we were in choir together, and we were in this group together. And yeah, so that's when things started to go in a new direction was the theater and writing in my journal and asking, what am I supposed to be learning from this? Which is a really great, I ask that a lot. Okay, why? What? I'm having this experience. What am I supposed to be learning from this? Yeah. And did that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. That in and of itself is a powerful change in the way of thinking about what you're experiencing. What am I supposed to learn versus why is this happening? I don't think, excuse me, I don't think many people comprehend that at all.
Yeah.
Don't, it, it's always what is happening to me? Why is this happening to me? Not what
Yeah.
am I supposed to learn. That thought process right there, that's a huge shift, especially based off of everything that you've dealt with, which is very interesting.
I don't think I knew this quote way back then, but I think Einstein is maybe the one who said, you have to decide, do you live in a friendly universe or a hostile universe?"
Okay.
And so when I asked myself, what am I supposed to be learning from this? I think I said, maybe not everything, the universe maybe is not against me. Maybe there's something else. going on. And then, but that lesson took a long time really to totally sink in until I was in my 30s, and I was getting my master's in theater at that time. Barry and I had moved to Portland, Oregon after we
Okay.
got married. And somebody handed me or said, "You need to read the book The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck." And so I went and bought it. And the first sentence is, "Life is difficult." And it was like, life is not just difficult for me, it's difficult for everyone.
Yeah.
So, that was like the end of the thinking that the universe was against me.
Right.
Because, sometimes you circle around back to those negative thoughts.
For sure. For sure. Did you have a sense early on of being able to, within your observation processes, did you have a sense early on that you could also feel things a lot deeper than most other people could?
Oh, my mom would always say that, "You're too sensitive. You're so sensitive." And I used to think that was a thing. And then when I got into theater, it's not a bad thing because I could connect to the character so much easier.
Right.
I don't think I thought had that exact thought, but I had that feeling that, oh, it's so much easier to play somebody when you kind of understand how they're feeling.
Yes.
And I would never have called myself an empath until much, much later in my life.
Yeah.
But yeah, when Barry and a fly in here, sorry. When Barry and I moved to Portland, and we'd just walk around the mall sometimes, and there would come a time where I'd say, "I'm sorry, we have to go home." And it actually, he's an empath too. So we'd get
Okay.
home, and it was like all these, I was picking up like a magnet, everybody's stuff. And
Yes.
I'd have to go home and go. And finally, one day I said, "Oh, that's their stuff. Get rid of that. And this is my stuff." Phew, okay. But it took a while to learn that. I learned that I was picking up everybody else's garbage,
Yeah.
or sometimes not garbage, sometimes good feelings. But yeah, and my mom would always say, "Oh, you're too sensitive. You need to toughen up." And I
Yeah.
didn't.
It doesn't make sense when you hear that early on and you're like, but yeah, that doesn't get rid of that ability to feel.
Yeah, yeah,
Doesn't get rid of it.
yeah.
As
And
you
I don't blame my mom for that because, she had a really hard childhood.
okay.
And so I don't blame her because she was sensitive. And that's probably what her mom told her.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I interrupted.
No, that's all right. That's all right. Once you're getting to the end of completing this theater degree,
Mhm.
do you have it in your head what you plan on doing after that takes place? Or was the potential of marriage coming into play where you weren't really necessarily thinking about career at that point?
It was sort of, it's the old story of Barry was an artist and he had
Okay.
done graphic arts too. And I was a theater person and we had to go get real jobs.
Got you. Yeah.
So when we got to Portland, we stayed with my grandparents for a few months until we both got jobs. And I went to an employment agency,
Okay.
and they sent me on some interviews, and maybe only one interview actually. I went to this, it was like a trade school, and it was a travel trade school. So they taught people how to work at the desk at the airlines
Okay.
or work at the desk at the hotel
Yeah.
or be a travel agent, you know.
Okay.
Uh, and I was the receptionist to start with. It was a horribly toxic work environment. I only lasted 2 years. In fact, I can't believe I lasted that. But
Like
it
to say, you stuck with it for a while.
well, we needed the money.
Yeah.
And by then Barry had a really good graphic arts job.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And so, but it was in Wilsonville. We lived in Portland. He had to drive to Wilsonville like half an hour, 45 minutes away. And it was for a trucking company, and they did the artwork for the sides of the truck.
There. Yep.
And so he had a good job. And I just, there was something happened, and I just had this kind of nervous breakdown kind of thing one day. And I
Mm,
said, I can't do this anymore. I just can't. It's killing me.
yeah.
We talked about it, and I decided to, that's when I decided to go to Portland State in theater and get my master's in theater art. And I had a job there too. Oh, well, yeah, I did. I worked in the daycare center. The campus had a daycare center.
Okay.
So I worked there in the daycare center and went to school. So I had a job and I was going to school. And man, that was great. I loved doing that again. I loved being involved. And I thought, well, maybe I will try to do something professionally.
Okay.
Theater, I think they probably still do, but they had a really active semi-professional and professional theater scene.
Okay.
And so I was doing all kinds of things. I was working, oh, that was another thing that I did. I worked in the costume shop of the college. That was another one of my jobs,
All right.
was after I stopped working at the daycare center. And so I was meeting lots of people,
Yeah.
and once I finished my degree, I worked in some of those semi-professional theater companies, and the city of Portland sponsored a company called the Musical Company. And they didn't do just musicals, but mostly they did musicals. And so
Mhm.
that's where I did a lot of my stage managing. I worked in the city's costume shop, and I was teaching at Parks and Rec, teaching little kids, drama. So we'd get
Okay.
together and we'd write this little play, and then we'd perform it for the parents,
Oh, cool.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And eventually I started working across the river at Vancouver, Washington as well, teaching classes. So I was doing a lot of different things, and it came to a point where this was our schedule. I would go to rehearsal at I had to be there at 7. So I'd leave at 6:30ish. Barry would come home, he'd get home about 5:30. We'd have about an hour together to eat dinner. Then I'd leave to go to the theater. I'd be there till 11:30, get home about 11:30, 12 o'clock, and go to bed. He'd be asleep. He'd get up and he'd leave at 7 to go to work. He'd kiss me, in bed. Because I'm like, and then I'd go off and do my teaching things,
Yeah.
during the day. But so we never saw each other. And
Mm,
when I was at rehearsal, because I was rehearsing 6 days a week, on Saturday too, and I missed family weddings and stuff like that. And it just came to a point where I had to make a decision. I'm either going to be married or I'm going to work in the theater. And so I decided to quit
okay.
doing theater. And that was right around the time, I think, when I had started doing Reiki, which is a hands-on healing technique. And we had left the church and we were going to this big mega new thought church. And then we met somebody and had her stay with us for a week from Germany, who was on her way to New Zealand. And the whole week she was there, she was talking about all her world travels. And Barry and I really wanted to travel a lot, but we couldn't figure out how to pay for it because we didn't have a lot of money, you know.
Okay.
And one day she's we said, "Oh man, that sounds so cool. We'd love to travel, but we have these people." Because I had a Heather, my sister, lived in Japan
Oh, wow.
at that time, and with her family, and we had contacts in lots of different places around the world. Some of them were Reiki people, and some of them were theater people. A contact in Greece of one of my theater friends, and Vivian said, Well, I think you can get a round the world trip ticket for only $3,000. And it was like, well, we might be able to afford that. So this one day, I'm taking Barry to the beach for his birthday.
Yeah.
And it came to me, we could sell our house
Okay.
and go on this trip. Because we were also thinking about moving out of the big city of Portland into some smaller community.
Gotcha.
So as we're driving to wherever, I can't remember what city we were going to, I said, I have an idea about how we can take this trip. And he goes, oh, I have one too. I wonder if it's the same idea. And I said, we could sell our house. And he said, that's what I was thinking. I was like, okay, that's what we're doing. We're selling our house. Now,
Nice.
people thought we were bananas, especially our family.
Yeah.
Why are you selling your house to go on this trip around the world? But other people who weren't family members, like the woman who was our real estate agent and our travel agent, and people that we had never known before, oh my gosh, this is going to be the best thing. You're going to just have the greatest.
Yeah.
And we did. We did. So that's when both sets of parents at that time lived in Arizona.
Okay.
And Celeste was married to her first husband, and his parents lived in Tucson. So Barry's mom and dad lived in the Phoenix area. My parents lived on the far western side of the state in Quartzsite, Arizona, which is in the wintertime, the population explodes. Everybody brings their RV and they live there.
Okay. Gotcha.
And although mom and dad at that time lived there all year round. And then Michael's parents lived in Tucson. So when we got back from our trip, we're going, maybe we should move to Arizona because our parents are getting older. And so Barry and I were the first ones. And we stayed with his mom and drove around Arizona and finally found a place to live, Sierra Vista, which is where Fort Huachuca is. That's the intelligence center of the Army.
Okay.
And it's also a desert training center. So people from like military people from all over the world come to Fort Huachuca to train. And and then Celeste and Michael moved down, and then Heather and John moved from Japan to Sierra Vista. So almost the whole family. My brother lives in Denver. He's lived there forever. But we got to be with mom and dad, all of us.
Right.
And it was really fun. And we got to go, we had a Christmas when my family went up to Barry's mom and dad's family, parents, and we had Christmas together. We all had Christmas together. So that was so fun to have us all together. Now we're the last ones here because my parents are dead. And Barry's mom and dad live in Missouri again, where
Mm.
his brother lives. Because they're older. I mean, they're older.
Okay.
And Celeste and Jamie live in the Seattle area, and Heather and John live in Florida. Yeah, so we're all separated now again. But just having those few years together was so great. And Barry and I found jobs, and I mean, we had a little bit of money left over from that we could live on until we got established. And now some of our family members go, wow, that was really brave. But
Right.
at the time they were like, what are you thinking?
Yeah.
And it just happened that the market was turning and we got a lot of money for the house.
On that trip, did you start to see things from your observant self that was spurring some creative thought or ideas within yourself at all? Because
Well,
traveling abroad, there's a whole lot of history and culture across the
yeah.
world.
Yeah. Yeah, because we started our travels in the United States because I have a cousin who lives in Vermont, and his parents were both alive at that time. And it was my dad's sister. And David still lives in Vermont, even though both of his parents are gone. And so we went up to Vermont to visit Aunt Betty and Uncle Jack and David, and before we left. And then we found out we didn't know why we didn't know this. We should have known it. that we were going to go to India and we had to get a visa to get into India. Well, we should have gone to San Francisco to get
Mm,
it because we lived on the West Coast. So our travel agent gave us the name of this guy who, oh, so sorry, who was like a travel fixer. And so we called him and he goes, just go to New York, go to the embassy or the consulate, whichever it is, and plead your case. Oh no, he said go to Washington D.C. to the embassy. That's what it was. So we had to make a little side trip to Washington D.C. And we went to the embassy and we pled our case and we said we want to go. We didn't know we were supposed to get our visa in San Francisco, but we want to go spend money.
mm, right.
Yeah, that's what he told us to say. And so we got our visas there, but this is one of the things to answer your question. When we were there getting going to pick up, it was when we were picking up our visa. The line was really long. It was like 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And there were all these people, and most of them were Indian nationals who
Okay.
had to go home for a while, how they had to go home for a while so that they could come back again. And so, and they were all complaining about how long it was taking. And did these people who worked at the embassy know that bureaucracy could be done a whole lot better? I mean, they've been living in the United States, and the United people in the United States do bureaucracy better than anybody else. And Barry and I were just having a really hard time not laughing because, we
Yeah.
think bureaucracy here is really
It's low.
excuse me. So so that was really funny.
Yeah.
Um and but when we got we all these people were like angels. I can't remember where we were, but we were I mean, might have been in the Netherlands and we were trying to get on the right train and we're looking at the map and we're trying to look at the train schedule and figure out where do we go to get on the right train. And somebody just stopped by and said, "Oh, are you having trouble?" Everybody speaks English, and you're
Okay.
practically, which was a little bit disappointing because we kind of wanted to learn to say a few things in German or, anyway, and they helped us. Oh, you go over here. And so we always met people like that. It was like one time in France, I told this story the other day. We were in Paris and we were in the first night we stayed in this hotel that was really not, it was run down. So
Yeah.
we had decided we were going to change hotels. So we go to find this other hotel that somebody else had suggested, and we had to take the underground, the the subway. They don't
Okay.
call it that. I don't know what they call it. And what happened was Barry and I are standing next to each other, and when we start to get on the train, all these little kids gather around me and separated me from Barry as I'm getting on the train. And I was like, "Are you away from me? What are you doing?" Come to find out, they were trying to rob my purse. I had this
Oh,
little purse, that had yeah, but the money wasn't where they thought it was going to be, and so they didn't
yeah.
get it. Somebody on the train said, "Oh, yeah, the reason they send out the little kids to do the stealing is because they can't be arrested.
Yeah.
The little children can't be arrested." So we had to go back and get our luggage and go through that same train station again. So this time, when we got to this train station, Barry said, "I'm going to take both suitcases and you stand a little bit away from me." And we could see across the tracks the older girl sending little kids off to
Yeah.
us. And so the little kids start to surround. I get on the train and start to surround me, and Barry comes barreling through with the suitcases. Excuse one, and knocking the kids over. And then they had to hop off the train because it was going to leave. Well, at the same time, Barry knocks me into this person on the train, this guy on the train, and he was an American,
Uh,
funny enough. And he'd been watching this whole thing. And he just laughed and he said, "Yeah, at least I take comfort in the fact that they're not trying to kill me with a gun, you know,
Right.
which was like, "Ugh." uh, so yeah, we met all these really cool little had incidents like that when we went to Aphitos in Greece on the island, the peninsula of Cassandra to take a vacation from our vacation. The people in the town were so gracious. Everybody in Greece was so gracious. They were so happy to have, you know, visitors. And my contact there from one of my theater friends, we stayed with them in Thessaloniki for a while. And he was becoming an Orthodox priest. He had just been ordained as a deacon. So that's the step before becoming a
Okay.
priest. And they were all gracious. All he and his friends were so gracious to us. So we didn't ever really have any problems at all on our
Yeah.
trip.
Okay. Good. When you guys went to India, did any of your religious studies, did it come back to mind in terms of what you were seeing in India based on their culture, um,
Oh,
spirituality, and different things like
yeah.
that?
Yeah, we took a tour of Delhi is where we stayed.
Okay.
And we were going to go down to Calcutta, I think. But we got into India and it was like culture shock, really bad culture shock. And we didn't have any contacts in India.
Okay.
But we did pay for it was the cheapest place to go. We were there for 6 days and I think we spent $300 on the
Yeah.
food, on the raw lodging, on the tours, on the
Yeah.
so we're taking this tour of Delhi and the guy was our guide was a Sikh. And he was so elegant and so interesting.
Yeah.
And he took us into a, I think it was a Hindu temple, and he was showing us about the different gods and then gods and goddesses.
Yeah.
And then he pointed out one of the goddesses and he said, "This is the goddess of education." I don't remember the name. And somebody said, "Well, why do you have a goddess of education?" And he goes, "We have a goddess of education because if you teach a woman, no, he said it this way, if you teach a man, you teach one person. If you teach a woman, you teach a whole generation,"
Oh, wow.
or something like that. It was something.
Yeah.
And it was like, I almost teared up at that.
Right.
And then another part of that tour was going to the location where Gandhi was cremated and they had his funeral and stuff. It was in this big park like area,
Yeah.
and people were outside selling flowers, those orange
Yep.
flowers, which I kind of wish we bought one of those. But anyway, so we get there and he's talking about Gandhi and what Gandhi meant and somebody asked him why because he was killed by a Hindu person. And so one of the people on the tour said, "Why did somebody from his own religion kill him?" And he just took a moment and he said, "Well, sometimes people, when they're afraid, they kill the person that is causing the change or something like that." Some eloquent thing like that. Oh my gosh, I almost started crying then again, too. In fact, I think I did because it was just this beautiful, the spirit there was so beautiful. And
Yeah.
there were people down on the platform where, because we were kind of up and could see down into this little hollow, and they were putting flowers on the platform. Oh, wow. And then on that same tour, they took us to the Baha'i temple, which you could see for a really pretty far away, about 3 or 4 miles away. And it looked like a lotus blossom. The building looks like a lotus blossom. And you go inside, and it's all white marble from Greece, because a lot of mountains in Greece are made of marble. And wow, we just sat there for you. half an hour or something. It was just so beautiful, so peaceful.
Yeah.
So, so I didn't know. I mean, I didn't remember a whole bunch about those things, but I kind of could connect. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and then of course we went to Notre Dame in Paris,
Okay.
and the choir was singing. Maybe that's why I started crying, because the choir was singing, and then I see the statue of Joan of Arc and I start crying. But everybody, all the tourists were very quiet and respectful because it's still a place of worship.
Yeah. That emotion that came up was seeing Joan of Arc. Was that an emotion of remembrance within you of something, or was that an emotion of connection to the woman that she was in terms of fearlessness and courage, different things like that?
I have wondered why I started crying immediately when I saw it. I don't.
Okay.
But yes, I do admire her because she was courageous.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, she was one of those people that, okay, God's telling me to do this, and so I'm doing it. But yeah, I don't know if there was a connection. I mean, I am not the family genealogist. My brother is. And we
Okay.
do have some really interesting connections, but I'm not, and we do have some French ancestors,
Gotcha.
but I'm not sure we were connected family wise to her.
Okay. So where I was going with it is from the perspective of what many in India think, as well as, you're doing Reiki work, you're working with energy, you understand the elements of that and
Oh, yeah.
potential lifetimes of existence
Mm,
that come into.
yeah. I I have only done a past life regression once, and uh, she didn't come up.
Okay.
And I mean, I suppose someday I might do it again, but I'm living in the now
Yeah. No,
as
totally get.
much as I can. So a lot of times, somebody will say, "Do you remember when blah 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 happened?" I go, "No," it's because I didn't think I needed that info and I jettisoned it.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it.
Um,
Totally get it.
yeah, I
Oh,
really don't know why I started, because the same thing happened when we went to the Amsterdam to the Vince Van Gogh Museum.
yeah.
And I go around this corner and there's this little, I mean, it was only about this big picture. And it was like a table and, it was just furniture, no people in it.
Yeah.
And the minute I see it, it's like something shot off that and went straight into my chest. And I went, whoa, what was that? And I go look, Picasso.
Uh, yeah.
And then when we go upstairs to the Van Gogh paintings, oh, yeah. So I really don't know why. I mean, I'll do that at parades too. When I was a little kid, we'd go to the Rose Parade in Portland, and sometimes the music, the marching bands or something, I just start crying.
Yeah. 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 You have a deep sense of emotional feeling when you're seeing something that is creative or hearing something that is creative, that's certain tones or certain colors or certain
Yeah.
compositions are connecting to you emotionally, and it's expressing through that way, even though you may
Yeah.
not comprehend what's happening in the moment.
I,
But
I
that's
know
that's what
exactly.
I'm getting from your story so
Yeah.
far. The Once you get back to Arizona and you start settling into work life there and family life there, how is that playing out for you from a creative standpoint? Are you able to step into something creative at that point, or is it just we need to figure out, get jobs, make sure we get stabilized, and just go from there?
My crying. Yeah. What I did was, my sister Celeste is a massage therapist. Barry and I are Reiki. Well, Barry decided to go the graphic arts route.
Okay.
So he got a job at a printing company. Printing, they're no longer in business now. But so he was working doing graphics. And Celeste and I started inner light healing, and I did the Reiki and she did the massage. That didn't, I mean, we're in a military town, right?
Yeah.
Reiki. So that didn't really work out very well. So what happened was I went to the school district. Since I had a master's, I knew I could probably be a substitute teacher.
Okay.
Only it's going to take 9 months for them to do, for my fingerprints to go through the FBI and, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Plus, when I went to get them, the police officer said, have you ever thought about doing a life of crime? Because we can't get your fingerprints very well.
Oh, wow.
Which I thought was so funny.
Yeah.
But finally, we got a clear set of fingerprints that they can send off to the FBI. But it took about 9 months.
Okay.
So I'm trying to make money doing Reiki while I'm waiting. And then once I got to be a substitute teacher, I told him after a couple of times doing middle school and elementary school, I was approaching 50 by then. And I was exhausted at the end of the day. Plus, middle school. Ugh.
Yeah.
So I did have to teach 1 year of middle school when I went to Douglas. But so I said, I will just substitute at the high school, which they were like, yeah, because nobody wanted to substitute at high school. But you
Right.
can have conversations with high school kids. And I remember one day one of the kids go, because it's a large school, 2,000 kids or more in this small town, but it's a feeder school. So, kids can come from Tombstone or Bisbee to go to that high school. And so I'm walking through the hall one day and, oh, there's the cool substitute.
Nice.
But what happened was I substituted they had two drama teachers. One taught the tech stuff and one taught the acting stuff.
Okay.
And so the acting teacher's daughter was going to have a baby. She was getting ready to retire anyway, but she found out I had a master's in theater. And she said, well, you didn't tell anyone you have a master's in theater. And it's like, I don't have to give my resume to everybody all of a sudden. So she was going to be gone for 2 weeks. So I took over for her for 2 weeks. And when she came back, I guess the kids just went, oh, she's so great, because she said, I'm going to retire. You need to apply for my position when I leave. So I did. And Arizona has this thing where, or at least they used to, where you could work on an emergency certification for 2 years while you're getting your education degree and your
Okay.
certificate. So I was teaching full time. I was directing plays. I was going to school full time.
Wow.
Deadly situation.
Combination.
Yeah. Plus there were only two of us who applied for that position. And the woman who was my competition, I knew none of this history. Her father was a band teacher, and he had had a terrible injury. And so he wasn't teaching band anymore, but he was managing their theater, which
Okay.
was a very large venue, and organizations in town could rent it out. Like Dolores, whatever her name was, she had a dance studio, and they would have 2 or 3 times a year, they would have their dance recitals at that theater.
Okay.
And so he wanted his daughter to have my job. So I'm so busy, I'm not paying attention. This is one time I'm not observing what's going on. He's working behind the scenes to make it look like I was a really bad teacher.
Oh, wow.
And so his daughter could have that job. I get my certificate, and I'm just about ready to start my 3rd year of teaching there, and they booted me out.
Oh. Okay.
and gave her the job, which she didn't have her teaching certificate. So I, this is one time I sort of stood up for myself. So I got a job in Douglas, which is an hour away. It's a border town. And I was teaching English, but it was the first year I was teaching seventh grade, which never wanted to do that again. But then I got hired for the next 4 years at the I was teaching English at the high school. And great. It was a great atmosphere. It was a little bit toxic at Boyna, but Douglas was a great place because the parents were very into education. They wanted their kids to succeed. And a
Yeah.
lot of them, almost all of them, were of Mexican descent.
Okay.
So the teachers were really respected, got lots of support from the parents. Wasn't that way with the military town school.
Yeah.
And I forgot that I did a couple of long-term, a whole year sub assignments in the special ed department back at Poina, which I didn't know anything about that, but it worked out. Where was I going with the Douglas thing? So at one point, some state officials came to do some like training with us or something. It was the one time I stood up for myself and I said, the person who replaced me at Boyna doesn't have a teaching certificate. And I do. And they kicked me out right when I got. So I found out later they came to the school and they said she needs to go get her teaching certificate.
Yeah.
And I don't know if she knew I had them on her or not, but it's the one time that I feel like I was kind of a little bit vindictive. I got my revenge. Um,
Right.
but really, looking back on it now, it was one of the best things that ever happened to me because I was happy teaching in Douglas.
Yeah.
It's just that I had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get ready and then drive there for an hour and then if I was directing a play, because they let me direct plays, I wouldn't get home till 5 o'clock, and I'd have to go to bed at 8 o'clock. Or I'd
Right.
get home at 5:30.
Right.
So, and then on the weekends when we were doing the plays, I'd have to drive over to Douglas, and so in 2007, I realized I can't do this anymore. I was menopausal. I was tired all the time. It was too much stress. And so I taught one more year and then I quit
Mm.
teaching full time at the high school and I got a part time job at the Cochise College
Okay.
teaching. It wasn't a lot of money, but as much money. But we made it through financially and I just enjoyed teaching theater because that was the best of both worlds.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
I could be home with Barry in the evening and go to family gatherings and
Was that theater experience the inspiration as well as all of those movies that your dad showed you guys when you were younger? Was that the inspiration for the classic cinema with the Sage sisters that you created? And
because whenever my sister and I talk, oh, but you seen this movie? Oh man, that was so great. Uh, you know, or I mean, we're talking about movies a lot. Too. We both love. We don't. Barry and I don't have it anymore because we are streaming. But Turner Classic Movies was our
okay,
favorite
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
station, and I still follow them on YouTube and watch their little shorts and stuff. And yeah, so and then one of the things that I did get to do when I was teaching at the college was teach this class called dramatic structure, and it's all about how the screenplays are put together and the directing and the editing and all that, how the story is told to get the theme across.
Yeah.
That was my favorite class of all the classes I've ever taught. That was my favorite class to teach. And so after about, let's see, Story Power is about 4.5 years or 5.5 years old now, but I think it was about 4 years old, 4.5 years old when I got the idea to start the classic cinema with the Sage sisters. I had to talk Celeste into it because she wasn't sure she wanted to do it. But all she has to do is just meet me and we talk about the movie, and then I do all the editing and putting it up on YouTube and all that.
Got you. Okay.
Yeah.
So
So,
story power came first then.
yeah, Story Power, I started in 2020. I was still
Okay.
teaching. And, I had to learn how to use Zoom because if you didn't have a lab class like
Right.
welding or some science or pottery where they had to go, make the thing, we were all on Zoom. And so even acting was really interesting to teach on Zoom. But I learned how to use it, the basics of it. And so I had been thinking about doing a podcast because my blog I started in 2013 and I was getting kind of I like to shake things up every once in a while. I was getting kind of tired of that. And my novel was published, which I should hold up. I don't know if you can see it.
Space between time. Ah,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. My husband did the cover for me and the
Oh, okay.
back,
That's great.
and he laid it out. I had written that, published that. And so that was in 2017, I think, that I published The Space Between Time.
So
And
let's touch on that for a second and
okay.
highlight what was the idea behind writing that?
In 1999, this is before I had long-term sub-assignments, which is basically your teaching.
Yeah.
I was just substitute teaching then. So I didn't have any grades, papers to grade or anything like that. I'd come home from school about 2:30, or I think school was out almost 2 o'clock. So I'd get home at 2:30-ish, and I started a novel, and it was about a daughter and a father-daughter relationship when I started it. But then the next year I had this long-term sub-assignment and I had to grade, and it was all meetings I had to go to because I had to write IEPs and I had to go meet with the parents and all this stuff. So had to stop writing it, but it was still sitting there waiting. And so when I quit teaching, I wanted to write a memoir at first, in 2008, but it was not time. It just wasn't time to write that. I started it, but it was like really bad. So that's when I started the blog. I said, I need to learn how to practice writing, because I'd never really taken any creative writing classes or anything like that.
Yeah.
I took lots of literature classes, but no creative writing. Uh, so then eventually the idea, that story I started way back in 1999. And Barry helped me pull it out of the archives. And of course, once I started writing it, it became something very different.
Yeah.
It became a two timeline story. And the woman in the past is the three times great grandmother of the woman in the present.
Oh, wow.
And it all takes place in Oregon. Well, okay, I take it back. Morgan starts in Vermont and she goes on the Oregon Trail to,
Okay.
and it's 1859, which is the year that Oregon became a state. So she
Yeah.
goes, so it's California and Oregon, and then there's this big territory, and then all the states.
Mhm.
And so Morgan is going to be the teacher of this gold rush town. And the person who invited she and her father was a student of her father's, who her father was a Unitarian minister and he was a theologian, and he had written books that were used in universities and ministerial programs and stuff. And so, but he got sick and died. Well, she had one living relative. It was her mother's sister who was married to this really rich guy in Boston. And she wanted Morgan to come and marry a rich guy in
Yeah.
Boston. That Morgan wasn't having any of that. So her friends helped her escape her aunt. And so she met some really wonderful people who helped her along the way. And part of the reason why I wrote that part is because I am an Oregon Trail descendant.
Okay.
And so I learned a lot about the Oregon Trail, about the wagon trains and how many wagons and how many people and where did they supply, what rivers did they have to ford, you know, stuff like that. And all the accidents that could happen, possibly happen. Now, Jenna in the present is, she works in the publishing company. She would love to be a writer, but, you can't make a living being a writer. You know how that goes. So she's an editor at a publishing company. And this one particular, the book opens with, it's 5 o'clock in the morning. Her fiance breaks off their engagement. And so she's upset already when she gets to work. And then the police call from Roseburg, where her mother lives. Roseburg is in southern Oregon. Her mother's been in a terrible car accident. She needs to come right because she
Mm.
might not survive. Now it's a like 3.5 or 4 hour drive from Portland down to Roseburg. So she leaves and she goes and but on her way out she contacts somebody in the financial department and says, I was looking at the financials for this person's book and something's not quite right there. Can you check that out while I'm gone, while I'm down in Roseburg? Well, somebody has been embezzling from the company, so when she gets back, she's framed for it and she loses her job.
Mm.
But her mother dies. I forgot to say. So, but she inherited her mom's house, so she just goes down to Roseburg to regroup. And she picks up these. She finds this box that looks like it's never been opened. It's a leather box with metal on it. It's old. She opens it up, and there are journals in it, and they happen to be by her 3 times great grandparents. 3 of them are by her grandmother, and one's by her grandfather. 3 times great grandfather. And when she opens the first one and starts reading it, her consciousness enters Morgan's consciousness. It happens to be the day that Morgan's father died. It's the
Oh,
funeral.
wow.
So they both are now full orphans because the other parent has died when they were young.
Yeah.
And so they have this connection already. And eventually Morgan becomes aware of Jenna's presence and they kind of become a team. And the second book that I've written is off with beta readers now. And Morgan becomes involved in the suffrage movement.
Okay.
But I started in 2014. There was nothing for Jenna to do. So I'm writing Morgan stuff and found out that Susan B. Anthony did go to Oregon. So I include that in the book.
Okay.
Uh, but it wasn't until 2018 or something, whenever it happened with Harvey Weinstein, that I went, oh, now Jenna has something to do. I can write her story. But so I've been working on it for a really long time. But, Jenna is going through all the stuff that we've been going through the last few years. And so so her story has started and stopped and started and stopped. Do I include the pandemic? Do I include, the political stuff?
All right. And so when you started the Story Power podcast,
Hmm?
what was the intent behind that? Was it for expressing storytelling as a creative and how that can relate throughout their lives and different things like that?
Yeah. I had been listening to a podcast called What Should I Read Next with Ann Bogle, and I love that podcast. I don't
Okay.
listen to it anymore, but I loved it. But it didn't say anything about movies. I loved the whole book thing
Yeah.
because I'm an avid reader too. I'm like a serial reader. I quit
Okay.
one book and I start another one right away. It wasn't always like that. It didn't become like that until I was in high school. But yeah, it's like a chain smoker. I'm a chain reader. So but I wanted something that included movies because I was enjoying teaching this dramatic structure class.
Yeah.
And it was always amazing to me the things that the students would notice about a movie that I had never thought of before. like, one of the movies, it's really super long, and I only showed it once, I think, because it's like 3 hours. It's Cloud Atlas. I don't know if you know that
Yep,
movie. And
I
it's
have.
based on a book with 6 timelines, and the way they intertwine the timelines in the movie is just so fantastic. Because
Yeah.
in the book, it's just one timeline, and then it stops, and sometimes it stops in the middle of a sentence, and then it goes to the next timeline. Well, you can't structure a movie that way. But one of my students said each of the timelines is a different genre. One of them's science fiction, one of them's dystopian, one of them's historical, And I went, oh my gosh, I never thought of that before.
Right.
Yeah. So whenever a student would say something that I'd never thought of before, it was always really great. I loved it. And I wanted to talk about movies like that. And my sister and I do talk about movies that way. So, yeah, I didn't really come up with the idea for that YouTube channel until sometime last year. And then we started it in February of this year.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, so Story Power was going to be people talking about the movies that they really got something, that they learned something from. Because there are so many movies that I've learned things from. But a year into it, I was talking to some women who had started the Douglas Oral History Project.
Okay.
And they pull regular everyday people from the town in and they record them just talking about their lives. Now, these are people who have family in Mexico.
Yeah.
And so some of them were old enough where they could relate things that had happened when the Mexicans and the United States were having a
War.
war.
Yep.
And Douglas was part of that war. And
Mm.
so their family owned a business, and you can still see the bullet holes in the building.
Oh, wow.
And it was really interesting to me too that the people would say, "Oh, my life's not very interesting." And these women said these people would start talking about their lives, and they were so interesting. And I thought, after talking to them, oh, every life is a library, and I need to be expanding story power, not just to talk about the movies or the books that they read, but what they're creating and why they started creating it,
Mhm.
and what do they bring to it from their lives? Because I mean, every author, every artist, my husband's a visual artist, so I know this. We have lots and lots and lots of artwork around our house. Um, that it's part well, it was evident when that painting of Picasso shot the energy off at me.
Yeah,
They put themselves into the paintings or
for sure.
into the sculptures or into the so it kind of changed a little bit. I talk to filmmakers. One of them was from Iran. He was a film student.
Okay.
Loved American Westerns.
Cool.
Was like, well, that's interesting. From Iran. How do you
Yeah.
get those? How do you get those films? uh, but he was fascinating. But I've talked to journalists, like a guy who used to work with Wolf Blitzer
Yeah.
on CNN. But now he's written this whole mystery book series, and the main character is a woman.
Okay.
So, oh, well, how do you decide to have your main character be a woman? All these little interesting little tidbits that you find out from people
Y-
as you're talking to them.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just so interesting. And I've talked to several Jewish people whose families survived the Holocaust, whose parents survived the Holocaust. Uh, there was a woman from Australia whose parents were Armenian and
Okay.
who there's an Armenian Holocaust.
Yeah. Whole
So
lot of history.
yeah, and at some point I realized, oh, I've got to read the books and see them. Like I went to watch your podcast, and I recently talked to a kid who he's like 28 or 29 years old, fairly young. And he has this whole, so far it's only 7 episodes, but it's called The Loneliest Boy on Earth. And it's each episode is, some of them are long, like 2 hours.
Yeah.
So I watched most of those. Now I try to engage with what they have created so that I can have a better conversation with.
No, that's definitely a great perspective to be able to dive into that. Makes for the conversation to play out a little bit longer.
Yeah.
The blog that you wrote for a period of time, Sage Woman Chronicles, what was the inspiration for doing that?
Oh, I was just wanting to write essays and practice writing.
Okay.
Uh,
I
What?
was going to say, did that take you back to when you were given the advice to start journaling?
In a way, I still journal,
Okay.
but yeah, in a way, it was like thought pieces.
Yeah.
Like something happened out, I wouldn't write anything about what's going on right now. But politically, something, or maybe there would be a shooting, or there would be a plane crash, or an earthquake, or something. Something would happen, maybe in the political world, and everybody's going up in arms about it. And I'm one of those people like, well, there could be something going on behind the scenes there that you aren't aware of.
Yeah.
And so I would write a piece about that. Or maybe I'd have a realization as I was writing my book, and I'd write about that. I belong to Prolific Writers Life now, and I write things about podcasting and how you can market your work through podcasting. And so I could put those up on my blog.
Yeah. That's interesting. The way that you describe that of not understanding what else might be going on and going back in your storyline about how your father was asking you those questions about the movies you were watching. Like,
Yeah.
what do you think that character was experiencing during the day, or what led them to do that and make those decisions in this film? That's very interesting how that plays out across your,
And sometimes if we didn't understand, he'd say, well, think about this. Maybe this happened to them, or maybe.
I,
And eventually, I was probably fairly old by then, but I realized, oh, I could use those skills of reading body language and facial expressions and listening to tone of voice to kind of understand what there might be something else going on here than what's being presented.
yeah, for sure. That's fascinating from my perspective of how you described your dad of not being totally educated, but stepping into the Air Force and then taking on a mechanical engineering type role, and that he was thinking in that way with you kids based on sharing this experience with the movies, which is an art in and of itself. And
Mm-hmm.
the fact that it was interesting to him enough to the point where he's trying to get you to start looking at it from a different perspective.
Right.
So
I think it was his way of teaching us about human nature.
yeah, yeah,
I'm
exactly.
sorry. I interrupted.
No, that was totally fine. Because you finished the thought in and of
Uh,
itself.
uh,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, I think that he was really a genius. And the reason I say that is because he didn't know math really or anything like that. But at one point, when Barry and I were living in we bought this small house in the one that we sold to go on our trip. We bought this small house in Portland, and it was from 1949, and it had a one-car garage. And it wasn't very large. It was maybe 1,000 square feet, or between 800 and 1,000 square feet. Had 2 bedrooms, a living room, kitchen, dining room, and 1 bathroom.
mm,
Well, Barry and I wanted to have, because in the 1980s, he was working at the where I told you where they did the decals for the, and he was being sent to learn how to use the graphics programs on the Mac.
Hmm.
So we were going to buy a Mac, but we needed a home office. And so my dad and mom drove up from Arizona and stayed in their motorhome. And dad and I, for the most part, because Barry was working and I was home, remodeled the garage and
Okay.
made it into an office space.
Gotcha.
And, there would be times when my dad would be looking up at something that needed to be measured exactly, but he didn't know the equation for how to, you know, but he would figure it out. I didn't know the math either. I'm terrible at math, but he would figure it out and it would be perfect. And he was one of those people who was very quiet, but we'd be at church gatherings or something, and he'd start to say something and everybody would shut up.
Right.
It was like that old commercial where somebody says something, everybody else shuts up. And they would listen to it. He read a lot of books, and they were mostly history books or books about the founding fathers or church books. He didn't read a lot of nonfiction. I mean, he read a lot of nonfiction, but not a lot of fiction. It
Right.
was mostly things that he wanted to know. He wanted to know everything, so he'd come home, watch the news. And I remember we're watching the news during the Vietnam War and during the civil rights things. And commentators would say something, and my dad would go, "Now, wait a minute. You didn't think about this." He's talking to the TV.
Yeah.
And so that just kind of became a way of life for us because he was always questioning everything.
Yeah, that's fascinating for me that he was able to excel in that environment of uh, the Air Force and then, carry that across to the rest of his life of doing things differently just because his perception was different, right? Because you mentioned that he was dyslexic. So the way that his brain is functioning is completely different than most
Mm.
people. And I,
Yeah, I didn't know that he was dyslexic until I was getting my master's of education, and I asked him about it, and he said, "I'm looking at the letters, and they're all a jumble.
yeah,
And then if I sit there long enough, they start to go into place."
interesting. Very fascinating. Very fascinating. The spiritual elements of everything that you've done, starting out in religious studies and getting a degree in that, and then over the course of the years, transitioning more into creative type work and environments. How has that spirituality played out for you across time and the creative ventures that you've tapped into?
It started when I was baptized, or
Okay.
actually the day that I was confirmed. Because in the church, when you're 8 in the church that I grew up in, you can join the church. So you can be baptized, and then the next Sunday you have a confirmation where
Okay.
the ministers place their hands on your head. Well, my dad and this other minister confirmed me. My dad baptized me. Uh, but we didn't have a church of our own, so we're in the like VFW hall or something. That's where we met for church. And I sit down in the chair, and dad and this other minister, I can't remember his name right now, put their hands, well, they put a little bit of oil on my head. And then they put their hands on my head and said this prayer. The minute they put the oil and put their hands on my head, I my silly little 8-year-old self said, "Okay, I'll do anything you want me to do. I'll help you out. I'll help you out, whatever you need me to do." And I felt this rush of warmth, and like my heart was like had a door and it opened up. And so when I opened my eyes, it was like The colors were brighter. I couldn't necessarily see auras, but I could kind of feel the auras of the people, you know. I can't really see them, but I can feel them. And it was like, oh, this is kind of fun. You know, so I started having conversations with God.
Okay.
And they really, when it really stepped up when I was a junior and senior in high school, these conversations that I was having and experiences that I was having. And so that was part of studying religious studies, was not just the stories, but okay, these people are trying to explain their experiences with God. I want to know more about that, you know.
Yeah.
And so then when Barry and I moved to Portland and we were going to a church that was fairly liberal, I mean, a congregation that was fairly liberal. And then unfortunately, the church sent a minister for this. It was a weird jurisdiction. Mostly, usually it was just the people who lived in that community the men would be the ministers of various levels and take different roles. They sent somebody who was like narcissistic, toxic, controlling, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, I was the church secretary at that time. Plus, I could teach the religious, they were called temple school classes. I had a certificate to be able to teach those because I had a religious studies degree, which irked this guy to no end. He
Right.
couldn't stand it that I could teach these classes.
Yeah.
And these were for people because they didn't have a seminary. So these were for people who were going to be ordained in various
Okay.
roles. Okay.
Yep.
And I wasn't ordained because they didn't ordain women until about 3 or 4 years after that, after I graduated, 4 or 5 years after I graduated. Then they started ordaining women. But I wasn't ordained, and he couldn't stand that I was teaching these classes. So one day, he would always come and sit in the back of the class. Yeah, I think he was trying to catch me doing something or saying something. So one day he came out and he was challenging me on something that I had said in the class. And I heard in my head, it was sort of like writing on a whiteboard, but I
Hmm.
also kind of like heard it. You can stay and die or leave and live. And I went, I'm out of here. And I went home and I talked to Barry about it, and he felt the same way. There were a lot of other little factors that happened. Now, my husband was an ordained minister in the
Yeah.
church. So he gave up his priesthood and we stopped going and we went to the New Thought Church. We did Reiki and we started reading Deepak Chopra
Okay.
and we read the M. Scott Peck book and Marianne Williamson and uh, Greg Braid, who's a
Yeah.
scientist and a spirit,
Yeah. Yeah.
and Seed of the Soul by Gary Zukav.
Yeah.
All those kinds of people we started
Right.
reading voraciously. And I was doing theater then too. And you know, somebody said it. When I was going to Graceland, this was an undergraduate. One of my friends in the theater backstage one night when I was doing a play called The Runner Stumbles and I was playing a nun, they said, why are you doing both things? Theater, because it doesn't seem like theater and religious studies would go together. And Celia, my mentor, said, oh, yes, they definitely do. Because theater and stories are spiritual. And I went, oh, yeah, they are. And I've heard Hollywood directors say that exact same thing, that this endeavor is a spiritual endeavor. You know, making this movie was a spiritual endeavor. So, did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. So if I can go off on a tangent.
No, that's all right. That's all right. We got there. That was perfect. Also, too, I think that's a great place for us to close out because the creative journey across multiple industries, I believe, is a spiritual experience.
Yeah,
Uh, and
it is.
one of the things that I always want to remind the audience of at the end of one of these episodes is to always listen to your heart, but as well be kind to your mind.
That's right. Yeah.